Poker, dominoes, dice, and other card games are enjoyed by the majority of the world today. But did you know that down to the cards that we shuffle, the dominoes that we lay out, the dice that we roll, and the idea of wagering money during games like poker has its roots in ancient China? The playing cards and dominoes, known as pai, developed sometime in the 3rd century, along with one poker-like game, yupa, also known as slips. And then later in the 10th century, Yatza, also known as leaves, according to historian W.H. Wilkinson. Researchers and historians suggest that these were played with cards. The translation for yupa translates to an old name for playing cards, and Yatza translates to card of today. Historian W.H. Wilkinson states in his research article that if either of these authorities is correct, playing cards can be proved to have been in use in China before their appearance in Europe. He states, quote, "The records of the Qin dynasty, for example, state that a well-known worthy Tao Khan, reigning from 259 to 334 AD, flung into the river the wine cups of yupa of his subordinates, remarking yupa is a game for drovers and swineherds. Yang Kao-chung, brother of notorious Yang Kai-fei, mistress of the Emperor Ming Huang, played yupa with the imperial gambler in the palace in 750 AD. In 951, Tai Tzu, the high ancestor of the later Chao, assembled his nobles to play together at this game for embroidered rugs and damask and gauze of sorts. 40 years later, yupa was put under a ban, and all players of it threatened with the headsman, after which the game appears very naturally to have fallen into desuetude. Yupa, however, Dr. Williams states, was not a card game. In fact, it was more or less what we consider today to be poker dice. He states in his article, quote, 5 dice were used, colored black above and white below, and one or more of the black faces was marked with a 2 spot, and similarly one or more of the white. The highest throw was 5 blacks, the hound, counting 16. The next was the rooster, 2 white 2s, and 3 blacks, counting 14. Later on, yupa would be seen to have taken a form more akin to backgammon. As time went on, more card games developed throughout China and Japan. The shape and size of the cards changed too, as well as the art depicted on the leaves, also known as cards. The game of dominoes began to change as well. They could be seen on tablets made of bone or ivory in the form of leaves. The game of gambling or poker began by wagering luxury items and materials like rugs and expensive items. We see that change in the Sung dynasty to wagering for money. The card games became something that was fashionable during the last year of the Tang dynasty, which lasted from 618 to 905 AD, and it spread as the it thing to play. With travel and trade, playing cards and what could be seen as poker traveled too, not just to Europe or the Americas, but to the Ottoman Empire and Middle East. The Tartars took to the game cards. The Tartars were a group of Central Asians, Turks, and Mongols who for centuries were a threat to the civilized people of Asia and Europe. They were eventually defeated in the 15th century by the Ming Emperor Yung Li. The Tartars took to the card games and enjoyed it so much they assembled in February 969 the Tournament of Leaves. Now, at History.com, it states that poker's closest European predecessor was poquet, which caught on in France in the 17th century. Poquet and its German equivalent pochen were both based on the 16th century Spanish game primero, which featured 3 cards dealt to each player and bluffing as a key part of the game. French colonists brought poquet to their settlements in North America, including New Orleans and the surrounding area, which became part of the United States thanks to the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. English-speaking settlers in the region Anglized poquet to poker and adopted features of the modern game, including 5 cards for each player, and by 1834, a 52-card deck. From there, poker spread up the Mississippi River and throughout the country, thanks in part to its popularity among crews of riverboats transporting goods via that great waterway. Soldiers in both the North and South played poker during the Civil War, and it became a staple of Wild West saloons in frontier settlements in the 1870s and 1880s. In 1871, the game was introduced to Europe after Queen Victoria heard the U.S. minister to Great Britain explaining the game to members of her court and asked him for the rules. More general acceptance of poker in Europe occurred several decades later, largely thanks to the influence of American soldiers during World War I. Over time, different games have dominated among poker players, including 5-card draw, 7-card stud, and most recently Texas Hold'em, which began its rise to dominance in the 1970s when it became the featured game in the World Series of Poker, the game's leading annual competition. Now, what this suggests is that Europe began playing card games and poker beginning in the 17th century. However, I personally disagree. During the 16th century, for example, during the reign of King Henry VIII, the English court were playing card games and what we know today as poker. They also played dominoes. Queen Catherine of Aragon and even Anne Boleyn, both wives of King Henry VIII, loved playing games and dice and dominoes. These were times before the 17th century, so I am confident that these Chinese games came to Europe much earlier than the 17th century. Now, Anne Boleyn came to the English court from France, and when she came to the English court, she was known to be a very skilled card player, so I'm also quite certain that she learned these card games while in France. The style of the cards changed once it got into the hands of the Europeans. This is where they changed the Chinese letters and images and made it their own. From hearts, spades, swords, cups, kings, and queens, what we see today in our cards in America actually have European origins. But the idea of cards, the games, and dice are Chinese at heart. So as you go to Las Vegas or wherever you love to play your card games, dominoes or poker, remember you are not only playing a form of an ancient Chinese game, but you are actually helping in preserving a piece of Chinese culture. Well, listeners, I hope that you enjoyed this interesting episode of For the Love of History. Remember to royally hit that subscribe button, share, like, and comment down below. And until next time, keep loving history and stay curious.